Zoom. All right. So everybody, welcome back to the Sacred Pathways book. And today is October 27th. And so our recording, we got a full house tonight, which is awesome. One thing I want to let you guys know that we talked about is next week is when the choir starts. So we're going to go ahead and postpone next week and just add one on to the end of it. So we won't do next week, but we'll do the weekend. We'll do the Tuesday after and the Tuesday after that for class. So let me go ahead and pray and we'll get started. All right. Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for this book. Thank you for what it means and just how people are learning you, God. And I just ask that you will just be with us as we speak and we have conversation tonight. Speak through us, Holy Spirit. Let this be your class. And we just praise you and thank you for everything you're doing in the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
And
yeah. So one of the things we kind of talked about, Caitlin and I talked about, was trying out last week's, which one was aesthetics, kind of being in solitude and simplicity. And the other one was traditionalists, which Dale was actually just talking to some of us about, going to seminary. And I was just going to see if anybody had any comments about trying out, anybody had a chance to try out aesthetics or traditionalism, even just having a symbol with them to remind them of God every day. Jim, you have a cross. There you go.
my wounded warrior necklace.
I like that.
you forgot we were supposed to do that.
No, that's okay. Yeah. No, it was, I thought that was it was some interesting, sorry, I'm kind of scrolling back and forth because I can't see everybody at the same time on this one. So I like that. I like having a little something to remind you constantly of God, because, you can get so busy in the day and forget, and looking at different traditions in the Bible, different sense, all types of different things. And then also just having a little bit of solitude and simplicity. In fact, I was hoping to have a little solitude and simplicity yesterday because I had the day off and my kids are supposed to be at school. And didn't happen that way. So didn't quite get to do what I wanted to do. So Caitlin, were you able to do either of them or try them out?
No, my plan was to look up some of the holidays that we celebrate and kind of see just the meaning behind those, but I never made it around to it.
Yeah,
So I won't
that's
be sure
okay.
to do that this week.
Nice. I like it. So, well, we're going to talk tonight about chapter 7, activists. I'm going to go over that. And I'm really curious if that's one of your pathways. And then Caitlin's going to go over caregivers. So I'll kind of do a brief thing on the activists so we can kind of talk about it a little bit. There's a question at the back of the book I wanted to kind of ask that I saw. And then we'll see what you guys kind of got out of it as well. So activists, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really hit any of the categories. Let me get her really quick in. I have to admit people from the waiting room. So activists, I kind of had a 1 on the majority of them, which I thought was interesting. But my sister, I would say she is kind of an activist. I always kind of thought of activists a little bit more like if you guys have ever been to like a Bronco game or some sporting event and there's somebody holding the big megaphone, standing on a chair, yelling at you, Jesus died for your sins, be saved, or you'll burn in hell. That's what I kind of thought. Anybody else kind of felt that way when they read this chapter? So that was kind of how you what?
I said, starting off, that's what I thought it was. I thought, oh, nothing's going to hit for me. But then I found a couple of things that is like, oh, wait a minute.
Yes. I was thinking the same thing. So, looking at some of the people that are in this book, I actually correlated it to another book that I like to look at and read, and it's called Spirit-Filled Temperaments. And this is really about how you can be the best person you are. And it talks about what we were going through, like the temperament, spirit controlled temperaments, like choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, melancholy. And it was really interesting because as I'm reading this, I'm like, you'd have to be a pretty strong choleric, which is a real strong tempered kind of a person to be this. And a lot of cholerics, one thing I love about them is they really have their why in front of them. They have, and that's something God's really put on my heart this year, is to study my why, my mission statement of why I do what I do, kind of the why behind, you know, why am I doing? I'm not just task oriented, but why am I doing what I'm doing? And I was looking at that, and a couple things with cholerics is they're not really frightened by adversaries, and that's what I'm kind of reading a little bit in this book. But they tend to encourage it. They tend to encourage them. They have that dog determination and often succeed where others might fail. Not because their plans are better than others, just because they still pushing ahead. They push forward. They don't get discouraged and quit. They're a lot of times just born leaders. And I really thought when I was reading a little bit about that, I thought for this particular pathway, you don't have to be a choleric, but I saw a lot of choleric traits within it. Moses, he had to confront Pharaoh. And I loved how he said to God, who am I that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And God says, don't worry, I will be with you. In other words, it doesn't matter who you are, Moses, it matters who's sending you. And I liked that part about that. And then with Elijah and Elisha, they both kind of, in a way, got knocked down just a little bit, which was they were frustrated and they were exhausted, especially Elijah when he fought all the Baal idols and bringing rain in. And and then as soon as Jezebel said, well, I'm going to kill you, he ran off, and, it really bothered him. Same with Elisha, when he was talking about the king of Israel and confronting Hazel. And then, he had a little bit of defeat in that part. Now, on here it said, I'd seen a number of activists who just can't accept defeat, and it kind of rocks their faith just a little bit. And I thought that was interesting. And same with Habakkuk. Justice is coming, even though Habakkuk couldn't see it. So he really had to live by faith, which is something that I think is a little bit harder for cholerics sometimes. They really need to understand that why, and then they put that why in front of them and go, is what I've seen. It's not necessarily an all or nothing in that. But confrontation, they definitely, confrontation doesn't bother them, which is really cool because I'm more of a peacemaker. Confrontation does bother me. I'm not gonna come up and confront you unless, God, if God says you need to go and you need to go now, I'll be like, yeah, yes, sir, and go. But I thought that was really interesting. Let's see. On page 133, down at the bottom, it says an example of Moses, the reluctant activist, is particularly appropriate. When activists live to see justice and righteousness work out so that it is visibly evident in the church and in society, they do this in a way of loving God. The confrontation will actually bring fulfillment, not exhaustion. I don't know about you guys, but total confrontation is very exhausting to me. I worry about it, I stress about it, and then finally do it, and I'm exhausted. And that's just who I am. That's how God made me. So, to see this, it's really neat. But thanksgiving, not anger, they're often a deeper sense of intimacy with God rather than a deeper sense of self-righteousness. So that's a real healthy one. That they're not, scared off. And I can see a couple leaders in our church. It wouldn't surprise me if they really they like this activist. I can just see them with their why in front of them, and they're going no matter what, which I think is really neat. On page 134, this was something that hit me down at the very bottom, the last line. It said, I realized then that my desire to be liked and accepted had to be crucified. I never wanted to be paternally offensive or stupidly obnoxious, but the fact is some people have chosen to hate God and his kingdom. If I'm going to identify myself with God and his kingdom, I will have to be hated as well. We can't expect to faithfully serve God and be liked by his enemies. And this happened to be talking about a group of people that weren't too fond of Christians. And I thought about that, I like to be nice and I like to love people. And I'm going to have to be okay with not everybody liking me, which is okay. One of the things too I saw that was interesting is without rest, activists may adopt kind of a self-defeating motivations of hatred, anger instead of love and compassion. So it's important for them to get rest because otherwise they'll focus on the other side of it, and kind of become that judge, which they're not the judge necessarily. Oh, sorry, I got something in my eye, kind of bugging me. There's a couple other things. I liked that on page 138, it talked about spiritual risk taking. While the rest of us may prefer to play it a little bit safe, activists often exhibit an almost insatiable need to see God break through in mighty ways, which I think is just super cool. There's a lot of them that will do this. On top of page 139, activists will never be satisfied by playing it safe. They need to experience that exhilaration of seeing a miraculous God come through in miraculous ways. In this sense, the activist bears and resembles balance to the enthusiast. I like playing it safe. I don't need to have big bombshells happen for me. So, I read this and I'm very, enamored by what they do. And I'm glad that God made some people like this because we need those strong leaders. We need followers, we need worker people, we need leader, all over. And so I love how God made us all, part of his, what he needs. He needed all different kinds. And so I really respect this. It kind of talked about different prayers for activists, like walking prayers where they will walk around a city block and really pray, or processions or marches, which you can see that, people even like they were talking about the abortion clinics, how they would do activists against that, which I thought was interesting. But I mean, they can start a movement like what was that movement where all the men would gather? Do you guys remember that? It would be in stadiums.
Oh, the men
You
gathering.
know,
Yes,
What?
the men gathering in stadiums.
Oh, Promise Keepers.
Yeah.
yes, there's got to be somebody strong to get those promise keepers.
Bill McCartney.
Yes, exactly.
There's an organization in particular in this valley called Warriors at Heart, and it's based on Wild at Heart.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's a breakfast group and a men's.
Warriors at Heart is.
He's part of that.
I'm involved in that.
Yeah.
There's 3 breakfasts and then a dinner each week, and it's based on Wild at Heart. And they have boot camps, they have men's retreats and stuff.
Wow.
Camp next week.
Yeah.
Are you
So
going
you
on?
need strong people. Yeah.
It's after I've been to 2 boot camps.
Yeah. That's cool. Let's see. One of the things, well, they also talk about intercession. They're really good with intercession, which is good. Prayer needs to be an important part of really taking that in. The temptations, which I thought was interesting, is becoming judgmental, which I could see that because if you have this righteousness that you're wanting so much, you could turn into that judgmental side. It did talk about the ambition and the sex and that controlling side of it as well. Elitement and resentment, I could definitely see, especially if you become that judgmental, but you're going for it the right way and the people don't want to join on, it could frustrate you. I thought they had a really good example of David in 1 Samuel 30 when he was talking about how David took some soldiers into battle, left some that were really tired behind. And when they were able to defeat the ones that went ahead were mad and said, no, we want all this. And David's like, no, you have to share it. We still all won the battle. And so, that could be a problem. Being preoccupied with activity and statistics could be a downfall. Lack of emphasis and personal sanity. You really have to take care of yourself with that part. And so definitely a high calling on these kind of people. We have to have every single one of us. And I'm now curious, opening it up, just a quick review of the chapter, but what do you guys all think about this? Anybody where they had a really high point system for the activists?
Yes.
Jim, did you have that?
Yeah. Wasn't my highest, but it was pretty high. And there was a quote on page 130, and I guess this is especially relevant to me right now in view of the upcoming elections. And it says, it's on page 130, and it says, a number of activists who just can't accept defeat when their political or social campaigns fail, their faith is rocked. And Janice and I had a lengthy discussion about that. She is more of an enthusiast, and well, God's going to come through and so on, whereas mine is, I'm going to get out there and kick some butt, you know, and especially regarding the social issues, and those things get, you know, abortion and issues such as that. Just I would like to call it righteous anger, but I think it's probably a little more than that. And those are hot button issues that you know, I can get pretty worked up about. But the idea of defeat, and I wonder, you know, sometimes, God, how could you allow this to happen? You know, where are you in this? And I've really had to work on that.
I'm proud of you for working on that, because that's hard. That's definitely a hard.
You know, you talk about temperament and so on, and I'm kind of a melancholy choleric, if that's possible.
That would make sense.
And so yeah, activist was pretty strong in me, and I confess I tend to be very judgmental. You know, if people go to church and don't get excited and they're not demonstrable in their worship, then I wonder what's wrong with them.
Yeah,
so, it's just me. You know?
That's okay. That's okay. You know, and I love that choleric personalities are so straightforward and goal oriented, and yeah, I mean, we need. You know, we need that. We need all of our personalities to make, you know, that whole that God talks about. So,
I played some college ball, and it got me in trouble because I would call out my teammates for not putting in the effort that I thought they should be putting in. And that kind of got me in trouble because they were a lot more talented than I was.
You're very focused. I love that. Does anybody else have a strong, I'm kind of flipping to see if I can see everybody, a strong sense of this pathway? You'll have to turn your microphone on if you do talk. Let me see. Did somebody say yes that I missed?
Actually, sorry. I'm interesting. I'm like bipolar in some respects when it comes to activism. I'm over 50% choleric. And I love verbal recreation. I love the intellectual side, defending what I believe in and stuff like that. But I'm weird. I will feel led to visit with somebody and not understand why. It's kind of how I work. And I'm big in intercession. But I'm also absolutely not the person that wants to lead corporate prayer. And I'm also not the person that wants to stand at the front of the room and have kind of a take all comers when it comes to spiritual leader and stuff like that. Like when they do call where you come pray with a spiritual leader, that is not me. But when it comes to verbal recreation and intellectual, I love getting on a tear or being led. I just don't like being asked to be that person.
So you don't want to go down and do the intercessory prayer or have people come to you to pray. See, I'm like, you just come and God will pray, you know, God will speak through us. You know, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that any day. But confrontation.
It's weird to me because when it comes to amped and stuff like that, and it's youth, absolutely I can feel comfortable and led, and it's so cool to see. Yeah, he connects anybody that's been involved with AMP. He absolutely connects you with the right person that you can speak to that person. And I know it's a God thing, but I can't stand in front of another adult and think, am I really the person you should be talking to? That's just, it's a thing in my personality. And there's a long story behind that, but there's a thing in my personality that's, who am I to speak on that?
Yeah. Well, let me ask a question. can any of you guys think of an activist, contemporary activist, recently, like a person or a person in our church that inspires you?
Franklin Graham.
Oh yeah. And if you do talk, make sure and put your microphone, take it off and mute. So yeah.
You take it off.
So
Oh,
No, you're good. There's a couple people that are still muted, which is just fine.
yeah.
But if you talk, just take it off. Yeah. So Franklin Graham, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And why is that?
Well, he is confronting a lot of the evils in our society and doing prayer walks and organizing groups to come together and pray for our country. And I think that's a very biblical activist to motivate or to mobilize people to, to try and return our country to what it should be as far as interceding and prayer and that sort of thing. I know when we were in California, he did a thing through the state of California, which goodness knows it needs to be turned around, and had a gathering at the fairgrounds in Chico, which was not far from where we were in Paradise. And there were thousands and thousands of people there. And he presented a message that we as Christians can't just stand back and let some of these things that are happening in society go. And the best thing we can do in those situations is to pray. There are those that are called to be confrontational, and we have sat in on school board meetings and discussing the curriculum and the social studies books that we thought was very much amiss.
When our kids were in school,
Walk for Life and a lot of those things. And so those are some of the reasons that I think Franklin Graham is an example to me of how to mobilize and do it in a spiritual way, not just go off half-cocked, I guess, and be totally confrontational.
Somebody that inspires me, and whether or not he's an activist or not, I think he probably does have some of it in him, would be our Pastor Hooper Sr. I've been going to fellowship for, I don't know, 28 years, something like that, quite a long time. And I remember when we were at the 29 road, and then I remember when we moved over to Main Street and we were at the Avalon. And then I remember when we were trying to buy this property on 24 road, and they tried to not let Pastor Hooper, and God already told Pastor Hooper this is our property, kind of a thing. And I remember him going above, I think it was like the city council, and I mean, all these things. He was not afraid to be active and an activist. I would have been like, okay, but he like just kept going and knocking down the walls and knocking down the walls. And to watch what he did to where now what we have it's pretty mind blowing. So to me, he's pretty awesome about that.
Amen.
Does anybody else have, Brianne, do you have one that you can think of?
I would probably have to agree with you about Pastor Senior Hooper. He seems like he is definitely an activist when it comes to the way he preaches and talks and stuff. So that's who probably I would say. I'd have to say I scored pretty low when I also read this chapter. I wasn't very high on it. But the one thing that did stand out to me that I liked was that God uses character flaws and makes them useful tools and strengths. And I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Alyssa or Donna, did you guys have anything, or Emily?
I scored really low on that one.
What?
Activist, like 7.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I scored a 6.
Did you? Yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't give you a 0. There was no way to go do zeros. No. It would have been pretty close to zeros for me. Emily, were you the same way?
Yeah, I was 6 as well.
Yeah.
Like it causes me to kind of have anxiety to be like the front runner. I'll be right behind you. supporting you, but sometimes if the mic comes to me, I'll talk, but I'm not going to be the one that runs to the mic.
Yeah.
So
Jim, this should really excite you that not all of us are trying to step on your shoes, but we're behind you going, yeah. You don't have to share your leadership there.
You know, it's funny. I've gone, like when I was going over this, I was going over the test results of all of these today. And I found that I've done a lot of leading and stuff, but it was more in the enthusiast rather than the activist. I don't know. It's just, it was a different reason, but I was doing the same thing. So.
And my sister's very much like this. And so I feel like I have a lot of respect now for it. Now that I fully understand my sister. Growing up, it was really hard, but yeah.
I actually have had some activist stuff in me. Mine is low, but I got it to a 10. But I thought about some of the things I've done in the past where I've stepped out and I've pushed things. We had a ministry in Reno that was called Acts 2:42. It's kind of like Walk to Emmaus or some of that stuff. When we moved from Reno to Colorado Springs back in a while back, 93, I just felt like God was saying, you need to bring it here. And so I steered that thing. And there were a lot of times where it'd be like, there's no way this is going to happen. And my darling husband was saying, Janice, give up. But when God tells me something that I've got to do, you know, it's just like, no, this is it. And he helped me through it. And we did, it worked out great. We had it. It was awesome. And so I have little bits of activist activity.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think I'm a strong one, but if I believe in something, look out.
I kind of feel that way with God. If he tells me something, I will, you know, because I know he's got my back. But that's cool. Well, listen, I want to go on to the caregiver side. So I'm going to have Caitlin kind of go over that and then kind of see how many of you guys are more on that caregiver side.
All right.
Let you take it away.
This chapter was pretty self-explanatory. I think there's several people in my life that I can think of that are caregivers, and they all show different passions that they run after for helping people. I wanted to start off with reading, find it, Matthew 25, verse 31 through 46, I believe. Yeah. And this is Jesus talking. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and majesty, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All of the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another, as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right, the place of honor, and the goats on his left, the place of rejection. Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, you blessed of my Father, you favored of God, appointed to eternal salvation. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me with help and ministering care. I was in prison, and you came to me, ignoring personal danger. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? The king will answer and say to them, I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, to the extent that you did it for one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it for me. Then he will say to those on his left, Leave me, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire, which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat, and I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I'm going to stop there.
Wow.
I think that's just really powerful, and it really does describe what a caregiver is. Somebody who's able to recognize that when we're serving others, we're serving the Lord. And he talks about it in here in the book. I'm kind of jumping around in the chapter, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Oh, it says, we like to define holiness by avoiding transgression. But in God's book, the sin of omission, not doing what we should do, ranks right up there with the sin of commission, doing something we shouldn't do. So he's just saying that, if we're called to lend a helping hand to somebody and we don't do it, that's just as bad as, choosing to do something that God doesn't want us to do. It's the same level of disobedience. And I just thought that was really powerful. And reading some of these questions in the back, he really challenges the question based off of the verses that I just read. He challenges us to see how our interactions with the needs around us, how those would change if we really took on that perspective that Jesus is the one that we're serving. And that kind of that really got to my heart. How many times a day, even just, I serve a customer at the bank and they have a need, or I get annoyed with them because they're not, they're asking too many questions or something like that, even though they're not, asking for food. My perspective is a little messed up. And so that really hit me in the heart, just knowing that I could be seeing Jesus in every question that I'm asked, or everything I'm asked to do for somebody. So that was kind of cool. Just a perspective change for me. In the chapter, he talks about, I lost it. He talks about how Mordecai was a true caregiver. And that was really cool to read, just because I had never really, you kind of glance over Mordecai because it's more of the story of Esther. But just all the ways that he sacrificed for Esther and for his people. And that was really cool. Just the fact that he took her in when she was orphaned, which if you stop to think about it, that was a really big deal back then. You don't get government aid or anything like that when you take in an orphan. And so then all the ways that he just really stepped out. And it says down here, it has always amazed me how true caregivers, shepherds, can become lions if need be to carry out their mission. Though a caregiver, Mordecai was obviously not a weak man. He could be forceful, even with those he loved deeply, when circumstances required that he be firm. And I think it's really easy to look at caregivers as kind of passive and just doing what's asked of them. But a lot of the times, Jesus will ask us to step out and do something that takes a little bit more strength and boldness. So that was really cool. He talks a lot about how Jesus was the ultimate caregiver. And I thought it was really cool that he mentions a couple places in here that Jesus is the reason when we look at religion, we relate it to serving and loving others. There's a lot of other religions that don't even have that aspect to them. And I think when you look at it from a perspective of somebody who's not a believer, I think they look at any religion as one that's all about loving others, when really it's just Jesus that laid down that foundation for us. Let's see. There was a list on page 156, just of other ways that we can consider adding caregiving to our lives. And I thought these were really cool. Just some ways that we typically don't think about. I really liked the idea of adopting a prisoner. And I looked into some pen pal programs for that, which I thought would be kind of fun. And a lot of these, when you read them, there's something that you would normally kind of turn away at, just because it's out of the norm. Like lending money is something that can be a little bit of a conflict as well. And so I thought that one was really interesting that he listed that there. Definitely something to be doing with the Lord's blessing and making sure that we're praying about it first. But it's cool to think that that's that some of these are a way that God can encourage us to be caregivers. Let's see. I did have a couple questions I wanted to ask. Oh, I was going to read over the temptations first. The temptations of a caregiver. Again, it's also really easy to judge others. Just seeing, if somebody's not actively serving other people. He mentions in here, it's easy to get caught up in, the song part of worship. And it's easy to judge others based on that and seeing, if they're actively serving. Serving ourselves through serving others. It can become kind of a disease, is what he says. Loving others so that they love you back. That one's kind of an easy one to get caught into if you're really desiring attention or others to love you. Mm-hmm. Holding down narrow definitions. It can be easy to judge the motives of an activist, but realizing that we can both work together. I like that he says one can help solve the underlying problem and the other can give comfort until the problem is addressed. That's cool. And then we can, it's easy to neglect those closest to us. We're so focused on helping everyone else that we run into and making them a priority. And just realizing that God calls us to serve our family and those closest to us first, because that's where he placed us. So I thought this question was really interesting. Is there any difference between loving others as an act of obedience and loving others as an act of worship towards God? So I wanted to know if anybody had any thoughts on that.
Can you say that question again?
Yeah. The difference between loving others as an act of obedience to God and loving others as an act of worship to God.
I never thought of it that way.
My first
work your way, right? One is trying to work your way into your salvation or get kudos from God, where the other one is you just love him and you love people and it just overflows from you. Mm-hmm. That's how I would see what you're.
That's really good.
I kind of view it as, as an act of worship, that's more of a lifestyle that you're living out. And then as an act of obedience, that can be case by case basis where God presents you with the opportunity and just kind of sees if you're going to follow through or not.
How many of you guys were caregivers or high on the list for caregivers? Janice, sorry, I can't see everybody. Okay, Elisa. Alyssa, Emily, Brianne, did you say yes too?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. I love that.
I think mama bears are automatically wired that way.
Yeah, it's true.
Guilty.
Do
I
any
know.
of
You-
you view caregiving more as like your profession
Yep.
versus what you're inclined to do?
Donna, it's our profession.
Emily, what do you do?
I'm a preschool teacher through the district, but I also scored high on the test as well. So I naturally have it both. I've volunteered at like a homeless shelter. I give food to bums. I've pulled my friend out of really bad situations. I've just always been that person that reaches out and helps, or I'm the one that always shows up at the gathering with food, or, like always trying to take care of people. If you come over, I offer you food, snacks, blankets, I don't know. I'll offer you probably my shoes too. I just kind of just always, I don't know. It's just something about me. I'm a nurturer. So.
Awesome.
So let me ask this. One thing that really popped in my mind with this particular one is how easily that victim spirit or that victim mentality can jump into place. Like I'm doing all of this and nobody's saying thank you. And I was thinking about that when it's working versus when you're just doing it for God, that victim spirit just of, I'm a victim, nobody cares that I've done all of this. And then you kind of have that poor me. Has anybody that does have this caregiving, have you guys noticed that at all? Or
Had it from time to time.
Yeah, it's like
kind of like a martyrdom mentality. You don't understand.
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's
Emily,
kind of natural to feel some of that.
Yeah.
One of my love languages is acts of service. And
I
so
love that.
what can happen is, I love when people like do things for me because I feel loved. So I naturally do that for other people. And so sometimes I have to remember that I'm like, well, for some people, that's not how they feel loved,
Mm-hmm.
but it is for me. So yeah, sometimes
Yeah.
you have to catch yourself sometimes and be like, well, maybe these people don't enjoy doing the dishes, or they don't want to, or that's not how they feel loved, or yeah.
That's really cool. Did you score pretty high in the caregiver?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
One thing that caught my attention was, so I run the moms group, raising rubies for the church. And one thing I constantly am preaching or teaching, you could say, is, you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely comes with the whole caregiver thing. And I've learned that if I don't take care of myself first, mentally, spiritually, whatever that looks like, it's hard for me to also take care of other people, or I'm doing it because I feel like I have to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, then your tank will run empty. So then what you're giving really isn't what you want or what you potentially can. So I can relate with that. You're worn out, you're tired.
Yeah.
Sometimes you kind of need a break.
Energizes me.
Yeah.
I like to be with people. I like to help. I like to be a part. And for some people, we get through doing something and it's like, oh, I'm so tired. It's like, I'm ready to go. I'm energized. So
yes.
Ministry, and we have that's my neighbor across the street. Just a second. 83 years old.
83-year-old neighbor across the street.
Mm.
Janet's just spent a couple of hours over today helping her with her scrapbooking and so on that she's doing. And we've kind of taken her under wing a little bit.
Yeah, so she's doing some caregiving, huh? As we talk about
Absolutely.
In action.
That's awesome.
I had the ultimate model of the caregiver, my mom, and I frequently prayed that I would have a measure of that heart that she had. She was so unselfish, and actually it's been a little bit of a problem in our marriage because I was so spoiled that I wasn't equipped to do some of the basic things that guys should do when they are out on their own, like do laundry and cook meals and that sort of thing, because my mom used to do it all for me, and my sister too.
Funny. I love that. Good job, Janice.
Yeah, I feel like- I
Caregiving
feel
in
like
action.
us and overdo it sometimes.
Yes.
Well, and as you were saying, Elissa, if you're needing to receive the acts of service and that causes you to pour out more acts of service in order to receive that, you're just, emptying your tank a little bit further and further. But that's the natural response.
Right.
I kind of have a question that as caregivers, and it apparently is easy, and I guess to some extent I'll include myself in that group, but to give to others, how easy is it for us to accept things from others ourselves? In other words, I can give and do something for somebody else, but it's really hard for me to accept somebody doing something for me.
Right. How you guys do with that?
Well, I have an experience. I am on restrictions as of currently now. So I had to have surgery, and I'm always the do person. I'm always doing everything, loading the car, doing everything all the time. And this completely flopped to where I cannot do anything. I'm a lot better now. I'm going to get released, but it got to the point I couldn't make my own food. I couldn't do laundry. I physically was restricted from anything. I couldn't drive. I couldn't make my kids lunch. So I had to learn how to ask for help for everything, just for someone to get a crock pot on the top of in my kitchen, or asking for help. So it actually helped me, even though it was really difficult at first, because it's like, I can do these things. Like, I am so insanely capable of taking my own trash out, but I still can't. So it's really helped to just, because I don't normally ask for help, it really has helped me to let other people help me. Yeah. So it's been a big learning experience, but I don't mind now. Like, I've asked random people at the store to be like, can you help me put my groceries in my car? Like, I'm on restrictions and I can't do it. And, random people, and, they just help me. So it's been good.
Yeah. So I read this.
Someone told me is, and I had a lot of trouble with that for a lot of years, is
Yeah.
I'll help you. No, I don't need anything. But then we have received more help, especially when Jim had his hip surgery and people brought us food and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been taught kind of through this last little bit and all, if we don't allow people to help us when we're in need, we're stealing their blessing.
Yes.
And I thought,
Yes.
man, that kind of put things in a whole different way. I mean, we've helped, like this lady that just called on the phone, and I've gone over and I've helped her with things, and she gave us a gift card. And I went back to her and I said, no, I mean,
Don't expect anything in return,
nothing. And she was like, now, Janice, and she really gave it to me and said, no, this is what I wanted to do, and you have to accept that. And that was the hardest thing in the world to do. But but I'm learning too that with people, it's like I need to allow them to do that, because when I don't, they're missing out on the blessing that they had that they wanted to give. And it was so it's been working through that.
That is so incredibly true. I was just looking for my book, 90 Minutes in Heaven, I think is what it was called, about this guy that got in an accident and this lady tried to bring him a milkshake and he said, no, thank you, no, thank you. But he didn't realize when she left, it hurt her feelings. And he nixed not only his blessing from getting a milkshake, but nixed her blessing from giving it to you. So that book was very prophetic to me. And I really started saying thank you. And yes, even though I know I could do it myself, I would start allowing people to do stuff for me as well.
That's so
So
true because I've done that
We
where
mentor a woman, and she's gone through a lot of stuff, and we're Mama and Papa Bear, and she's our baby bear. And so she will come and she's, gives us, that's her gift is giving people gifts. And it's kind of like, slow down, slow down, slow down,
yeah.
And then I think caregiving and all, mentoring or bringing somebody in and helping them. And I would love to see in our church a mentoring program with older women and younger women and, moms and that kind of stuff. I think that would be really, really good.
Pretty neat.
Yeah.
Donna, did you have something you were saying?
Yes, I was saying that I have actually had my feelings hurt when I have blessed somebody and they don't accept it because they're having a hard time. And it really feels horrible when you're trying to, my dad, he was a giver, but he couldn't receive stuff. And so like I'd get him a present, I'd shop a lot for it. It was personal for him. And he'd like, you shouldn't have spent so much money, here, go ahead and take it back. I don't need it. And I'm just like,
right.
Oh my gosh.
Had a hard time receiving.
Yeah, it was really tough. So there is a piece of that the people that have a hard time receiving really need to learn about how they're hurting the person that's trying to bless them. Yeah.
That was a hard lesson for me to learn too. I had to learn that as well.
As a metaphor comment for the caregivers, and when you ride on an airplane, they tell you to make sure you put your mask on first so then you can help the others around you, like your kids. I don't know if you're, as a metaphor, if you're mindful of it, or sometimes I want to teach my wife to be selfish when you see her not backing off from the giving and say, you need to serve you and refuel sometimes too. At what point don't you need to reward yourself? So I don't know if any of you experienced that or are mindful of that.
Yeah. It's hard to give when you're empty. Absolutely. No matter what your love language is and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like sometimes there's a sense of pride involved, that, well, I can do it, I can do it better. I think of kids, and giving them chores to do, like mowing the lawn or that sort of thing, and then not letting them do it because you think, well, they can't do it as well as I can. So I'm just going to do it, instead of, letting them take some responsibility. I mean, if it doesn't get done perfectly, why, oh, well,
It's really good. Nice. Did you have more on that, Caitlin, for that chapter?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think caregiving is something that's a little bit easier to relate to as a Christian. We all have our certain ways of doing it, for sure. But I think it's something that, God calls us all to do in one way or another.
I think that's neat. I was talking to Caitlin before this, and I guess it's kind of why I brought up that victims, mentality or however, is because I used to give, all the time, kind of that caregiver, and my love language happens to be one of them happens to be quality time. And I remember I kind of got a little bit like used and abused, like, oh, Lori will do it, or, to the point where it was not like they weren't thankful for it. And I was giving up my quality time for doing stuff. And I know it kind of broke me a little bit in that respect, to where I think probably I am probably more of a caregiver than I rated myself, but I think because of hurts in the past, I've shied away from it a little bit. And so it's something I probably need to work on and look at and, just reevaluate a little bit. But I am a nurse, and I when I get to take care of my patients, it's the best, even when I'm with the transformation team, I usually leave fuller than I go in, and, and just being able to care and love and nurture people, is a huge part of me. But yeah, I think, everybody gets hurts in life and everybody goes through things, and it can definitely change how you do stuff to where you shy away from things or you don't. Yeah. But I think Emily, like you, I want to make sure everybody's comfortable in the house and you got something to eat. What do you need? What do you need? And yeah, it's neat. It's really good.
For Emily and some of the caregivers, the comment, you need to be mindful, or do you find yourself needing to be mindful, am I being a rescuer, or am I in this for helping and whatever? Like I was raising my hand earlier because I can do it better and whatever. And somebody posted, I know Facebook, posted something talking about, and it just hit me right in the face with especially one of my kids saying, don't worry about me falling. The person that I'm going to become is going to catch me. Talking about, are you doing it to be a caregiver? Are you doing to rescue? Because you need, sounds weird to say, sometimes you need to wonder if it's truly going to help in the end. And that's not to dissuade nurses and teachers and all of that. It's a different thing, but you have to make sure you're not saving somebody from themselves.
Absolutely. Sometimes people have to walk that hard path, because that's what changes them. That's what gets them out of where they're at. Sometimes people have to hit rock bottom. Some people don't, but some people do.
Emily,
it's tough.
Were you talking earlier? I think you were on mute.
I was. I didn't know. Just for little extra noises, I muted it. But it kind of goes along with what Dale was saying about the just relationships. Like, you have to be careful as a caregiver, like certain relationships that you put yourself in, because sometimes as a giver, you kind of give so much, and then that person can't take advantage of it completely. And then you're left feeling hurt going, well, what did I do? Because I just helped, and they can just run off, or, they can kind of burn you. So that's like, I have to be really careful, because I'm such a nurturer. Like, anybody that's closely around next to me that are like, I'm injured, I don't feel good, or I'm hungry, I just have this need to, like, well, let me feed you, like, let me help you, let me give you a blanket, or I don't know, like, let me give you, like, let me, so I really sometimes, it's not really like a turn off button, but I really have to be careful how much I reach out, because I can reach out to the wrong person, and they can completely manipulate and abuse that. And I've had that happen. So that's a big learning experience about me having this as a pathway, that I have to learn boundaries with being a caregiver. You have to learn what you are okay going past with certain types of, giving or donating, or, giving time of yourself to some type of, some person or something. So yeah, it's also has its downfalls sometimes, but it's, we're all needed. I think we're all, so,
definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's a caution too, because I think sometimes we can potentiate or facilitate a codependency. And that can certainly be harmful. The motive may be good, but there may be on the part of the other person that is being ministered to, that they develop a codependency, and then it becomes a little toxic.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There are some people that can. Yep. Yeah. But there's other people that don't. Yeah. Some people need a lifting hand up, and then they can soar. Yeah. But some people can't. Yeah. You do have to be careful of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, like what Emily said, boundaries are super important for caregivers. And I think something that I've learned to do is to kind of stop for a minute and kind of bring it to God and be like, okay, where's my boundary? What do you need me to help them with? Is there anything specific that I can do for this person that'll be most helpful? And that way I'm kind of bringing it to God first instead of going through my own filter, kind of assuming what people need. Because I feel like we can kind of get in the trap of, oh, I know how to help this person. But in reality, you know, God knows what they need better than we do. So,
you know, and praying and asking God to show you their character, to be able to show you what you can and can't and how you can and can't help, you know, is huge as well. Yeah. Pretty cool.
I've approached a different topic, sorry, rabbit trail. I've had times when I've had interpersonal conflicts with people, and I find myself, Joe Tennyson's dad flipped my script. And he said, and it just a simple question, he knew what I was going through, and he said, are you praying for what God's going to do for you with them? Are you praying for what God can do with them for them? Who are you actually praying for? And sometimes from a caregiver standpoint, whose needs are you looking to fulfill by this action? Even in prayer.
Yeah, it's really good. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Yeah. Well, we got about maybe 5 more minutes. I want to be real respectful of everybody's time. I love our conversation. I think it's just I think it is so neat just to hear, especially with people with different pathways, you know, how they are, and it helps me be able to respect their pathways and love them through that different way. Have you guys gotten to see that a little bit with this book? If you can get anything out of it instead of judging, but to respect on those other sides of what people are doing, which I think is neat. Yeah. So not next week. So we're going to go ahead and skip next Tuesday, which would be election day. Because we really want our choir people to go and get ready, because I'm excited for the holidays with you guys. And so we're going to follow up on, let me just double check the dates really quick. So we'll not do it next week, which is the 3rd, but we will go ahead and do on the 10th, we'll read chapters 9 and 10. So that would be enthusiasts and contemplatives. And then on the 17th, so we'll move the 10th one to the 17th, we'll finish up with, I believe it's, let's see, intellectuals, which I think is really interesting. And then kind of finish off the book as well with that, just kind of the last closing chapter. So we'll do 2. So you'll get a couple weeks to read the next 2 chapters. Any questions or thoughts with that?
We have really enjoyed reading the book, and then Jim and I talking about, because I've had trouble going through the questions. It's like, well, I'm part of this, but no, I'm definitely not this.
Overthinks everything.
I overthink. I'm one of those. I overthink everything. And he's always telling me, Janice, just get the main points. Like, no, this says this and this says this. But we have really enjoyed reading this together, and then going back over the chapters and showing each other, well, I see this, and it's like, oh yeah, I do see that, or whatever. So it's really been good to talk about for us.
We had a good
And that
conversation.
respect with each other, you know, respecting that you're different and okay with that, and try to learn from each other. Yeah.
We had a good conversation this afternoon. You know, I'm more of an activist, but I also deal with this this what if thing that, you know, well, what if this happens with the election? That spirit of foreboding that I wrestle with, and you know, what's going to happen. And Janice, being more of an enthusiast, she says, yeah, but God's got it.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right. That's everything I go back to, that verse in the Bible.
Back to,
God
yeah,
elects all
but
officials.
Like, no.
you know, and everything's going to go to heck, and so on. And she said, and something that our mentors in our Restoring the Foundations ministry, when we were going through a difficult time, told Janice especially, she said, how big is your God?
Mm-hmm.
And well, yeah, but how big is your God?
Yeah,
and
stuck
I'm
with me.
really trying to work on that.
Yeah.
I don't know, Jim. Maybe it's just the trigger to have a great big wedding.
Yeah.
With the end times. I
Sorry,
love it.
devil's
I love it.
advocate there.
Yeah. You know, it's
I'm too
funny that you say
competitive. I
that.
don't like to lose.
My mom has been praying for years for a certain thing to happen, and she's been praying one way, praying. And amazingly, God completely fixed everything, but did it a completely different way than she would have expected.
Mhm.
So kind of like you're saying with the election, she was praying one way, but it was amazing how God did it his way, but came to even better conclusion than she had been praying for, which is just so neat. And so, you know, trusting God with everything that he's doing and allowing him to do it differently than how we expect him to do it is just absolutely amazing, you know, with how he's going. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, listen, let me pray for everybody, and we'll let you have your evening back. So, Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much. Thank you for being in the midst of our conversation. Thank you for letting us respect each other and learn from each other. And I just praise you for that, God. And I praise you for everybody that got on. It's such a fun group to have, you know, reading a book together. And God, I know everybody probably has some special needs, some special requests. I know there's a lot of anxiety with just kind of what our country's doing and the COVID and just everything. And God, I ask that you will just bring your spirit of peace upon us and just totally put our eyes on you and trust you with what's going on in so many realms. And I ask that you'll put protection over all this group of people and protection over our church. And we trust you, God, with what you're doing. And we ask that you will just show up in a mighty way. And we just praise you and thank you for what you're doing. In the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen.
And
All right, everybody. You guys have a great night. And we won't see you next week, but the next week after.
All right.
Okay.
bye.
Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.
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 The dog's trying to push me over.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Recording is